an event for young activists or young people who are interested in activism in Gloucestershire to come together, find out what each other are about, find out kind of what's going on in the county, and to celebrate what's going on as well, because we don't do enough of like celebrating the hard work that young activists are doing.
One of my favorite quotes is, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I think art, like the project that you've all done in terms of being in different spaces and collecting with people, is like you're bringing people into a space and building a conversation that feeds. And I think when enough people realize that they're invested in the same cause, it can have a snowball effect. I think like theatre art allows us to have conversations in a way that doesn't feel like we're attacking other people, but we're showing something in very different contexts that are like, this is the human experience and this is one way that it exists, and so people can walk into something and being like, okay, and like you can be very overt with how your political point of view lives in art, or you can be very subtle. And both serve the same purpose in terms of engaging some sort of conversation that will move you closer. Yeah.
During my teenage years, I went through a bit of a journey of realising how impactful the fashion industry is on the climate and also people. How can I, as a young person, grow up and make plans to be a part of this industry that is actually like being incredibly harmful to my future? Yeah, it just kind of ended up being a really nice, like, okay, I care about the climate, but I can also use my skills as an artist. And that's kind of where I'm at now, where I feel very passionate about using art in a way that not only highlights the severity of the crisis and lets us kind of explore the emotional side of it, but also in a way that helps us try and imagine what the world could look like once we achieve climate action.
If I went up to the counsellor in my normal life and I started talking about my MP like an ogre, I'd be rejected because that would be disruptive and a violent way to speak and disgusting and not acceptable. But when I put that into art, it became like a form of poetry, and it became this like abstract representation that they were forced to listen to because it was there alongside facts of climate change and alongside other depictions of organising in a way that we do to pander plays. You can do it where you can direct it at certain figures, or you can look at action that is being taken on a national level, action that's being taken on a governmental level that you can try and influence. But I think with art, it's a lot more broad and it's a lot more about communicating. And I think action is going to be taken by people who are engaged, and there are so many people who are engaged in issues. And it's just about like guiding people and providing a sense of solidarity, I feel like, with art. I think it was great that we were able to reach new people with our show, but a lot of people that were coming were already involved in the climate movement, and I think it's more about creative sustainability and sharing experiences and making sure that people feel supported and that people feel energized, because any movement that happens is happening over a very long period of time, and there are different stages of success and different levels of action that will be achieved. So I think supporting people who are already involved and engaged is just as important as reaching new people.
But I think my main kind of topic in constructivism is disability representation in media, in film, obviously, because I am an actor, but I know a lot of disabled actors as well, and I want to help them, because I think when it comes to sort of inclusion in media, I think we're going the right way, but I think that disabled characters are sort of lagging behind, and there's this tendency for able-bodied actors to play in disabled roles.
I work for Creative Sustainability and with Gloucestershire Climate Group. What I'm hoping to get out of today is we've had a lot of young people that we're working with tell us that they really want to connect with other young people in the county and build a movement and start to organise in their community. I think this is a really, really perfect start of doing that and crossing over those different intersections and different communities.
TA in some English classrooms for like year 7 to year 9, and I remember one teacher I had, and when I had her for GCSE, she really liked me, but I didn't like her. And I'm realising now, like just as you were saying it, why exactly this was I didn't like her. Because she was always talking about how she had to rush the lesson and they had loads to get through. And so it wasn't about understanding, it was like really dehumanising. It was like, you are like, there's this idea of like banking education, so you're just a bank to put information in you. And this was how she was treating us. And so if anyone was getting in the way of being effective, it would be like the worst thing for her. And like, so people, even if they didn't understand, it would be time to move on.
When I talk about abolishing that relationship, I'm talking about being more on equal footing. I think it should be more of a partnership where you are learning off each other. And I hate to bring maths up again, but that's what I know about as the classes I take, where the most productive lessons is when we've been working together on something, and my teachers learn stuff from me and I've learned more from my teacher. But I think it's that channel that should be encouraged, because it shouldn't be a teacher here and this is the information you need to know, you need to learn it in this way, this is how we're going to do it. And I think that's what's harmful.
I think we need to find a balance, as most people I think we all kind of agree on, that we need to have a way for the teachers to learn from the students and the students learn from the teachers. If we can get that level between the students and the teachers, but also teach the students to respect the teachers if they're good enough, and if we can actually find teachers who are genuinely helpful, like the ones you've all referenced to.
But in terms of lowering themselves to the same level as the students, I think would help the students to have more respect rather than feeling pressed upon.
My maths teacher was very, 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 very laid back, and like we called them, so in our sixth form we like to call them by their first names, and that's the most productive maths lessons I've ever had. It's the best I've done in maths when he talked to me. He talked to me like he would talk to, it felt like I was talking to my older brother. Me, him and my older brother had very similar personalities, and that was when I was the most productive. It's when I've learned the most. It's when I worked the hardest outside of school as well, and it's when I felt like I've actually developed the most. And I would say with obviously the moment most people's counter argument to why do teachers need to kind of be on a separate entity is the discipline side, but then I think really you should think about what that discipline side is why those kids messing about, and if you kind of remodel the system so to try and help attack the reasons why they mess about instead of just kicking them out into detention kind of thing.
And today I've been facilitating the Exploring Solidarity workshop, as well as the Why is Land Power sort of community discussion. What we want to talk about here today is decolonization, but in a different kind of way, not necessarily in like the concept sense and the theory sense, but actually what does it mean for you guys here in Gloucestershire, basically, and how is your struggle connected to Indigenous people struggles, peasant struggles, like different kinds of community struggles in the Global South? And the answer that we found through the campaigns that we've been involved in, like What the Fuck WWF, that sort of thing, is that what connects people across the world is land. We all need land. That's where water, food and air comes from. So we're going to watch one video about a community that we're in partnership with, and then have a bit of a conversation like in a small group.
Nebejo gisho inei namuta ngishu dakaraki nana ambuni naetuo naidurti lomu atapala atapejorie nalenkai wei nalo aitoki anyamalu enkai kati inewueji aitoki aiteru ai maisha dakaraki ninche laetuo apejoo. Ore tanakata ketii iltung'anak lemeekure tanakata eeta enkiteng likiyiolo ajo loong'ania dakaraki lelo tung'anak ootaarutua nkishu nepejoo nkang'itie neponu namuta nkishu ang'. Neeku ore ninye dakaraki ina enyamali teyiok pii naa enyamali ninye toltau lai nanu aitanyamala nanu oleng. Ninye naibung'ita enkishui e pooki toki naishu. Neeku ore duo tipat ang' iyiok tena kulukuoni ena kulukuoni nenyanyuk ake etiu ake enaa tenikiye enaikash naaji tenaa ikituata paa kelo sininye enkulukuoni amu meitoki aishu.
Gloucestershire as a place in the UK has a massive history of resistance against that. Like you had the diggers rebellion, you had these massive peasant revolts and peasant mobilizations that were like, no, I guess the basis of this conversation is the process of what's happening to the massive right now is something that happened to your ancestors in the 13th century. And in that sense, how do we work from there? For example, if we're talking about climate justice, like, okay, what does that actually mean if the history of my people is the same history of massive people? They don't need to be exactly the same, but being able to have that common ground, land gives us that.
You know, where I come from, it's one of the beautiful places in the world, but so much of it is kind of just owned by people who want to can afford it for themselves. I just think I find it especially so angry, especially
some commissions like asking for funds and stuff to maintain certain lands, but it's like what are they actually classing maintaining lands as? Is it a national trust property that's just, you know, keeping a really shortly mown lawn and like a manicured shrub?
There's so many things that separate us from that. Like, you can't have access to land if you don't go to school, you can't have access to land if you don't earn this much money, you can't have access to land if you don't have a house, whatever. Like, all of this stuff, when actually we need to reclaim like the ability to plant, the ability to have communal space with the sun, if we're ever going to be able to get out of this mess and actually be able to, like, you know, survive essentially together.
Disconnected from like our use of land and our traditional practices and stuff, and how that then becomes like this money making, like gentrified thing. Like, we never used to have to buy vegetables wrapped in plastic, but now because we have that, now we have to pay like 5 times as much to get it not wrapped in plastic, like when we always did it before and it was fine.
I think more affordable housing tends to be in areas with like higher emissions, which obviously like impacts on people of colour living in like inner cities, more so like being from Cheltenham. I'd say Cheltenham's very like very white compared to Gloucester, and that may be due to housing costs.
In terms of like housing, and we've got places like Gloucester Docks, warehouses that have been renovated into flats that aren't actually affordable, where there's allotments in mainly wealthy areas, and then the allotments in Cleve were turned into housing, and how a lot of the housing that's being created is mostly not affordable, and the cheap housing is poorly constructed.
It's really beautiful what I've witnessed and experienced today, because I have really seen how young people here in Gloucestershire, the youth of Gloucestershire, are ready to understand how they have more in common with young people in Colombia, with young people in Nigeria, young people in India, than they do with the ruling class and the elite here in the UK, and why them working in their communities to liberate their communities here in Gloucestershire needs to be accountable to the liberation of all other young people across the world.
I think they are better than friends like, oh, I want to buy something.
Workshop on radical co-resilience, which is all about sharing skills and ideas and practices that bring care and well-being directly into the middle of action, integrate it into action, rather than have separate spaces where people go to share their feelings or have a break afterwards, with an idea of creating a culture of care where young activists feel held and belonging and less abandoned.
So hi, welcome everyone. I'm Sari, or you can call me Zaza. So for this session, we will be talking about a young activist from Malaysia, which is my original country. Before I start, I would like to share something very personal. First of all, I'm a transgender woman from Malaysia. I fled my country. It's simply because I'm very marginalized there. I'm discriminated, and even I'm considered as a criminal back in Malaysia. It's hard. Malaysia is a place which is very difficult to be an activist for so many things. we have an environmentalist who got sued, sent to the court by the royalties for questioning about deforestation, and we got transgender women jailed for just being themselves out there in the wedding reception. When you choose to be an activist, it does take its toll. It does take its toll on your mental health, on the safety of your family, even your family, not just yourself. And last year, before I fled Malaysia, I consider myself as a very lucky person to be able to know Ain.
My name is Ain Husniza. I'm 18 years old, and basically what really pushed me into activism was an incident last year in April where my teacher made a rape joke in class when he was teaching us about sexual harassment.
So I just came home from school, and today in class we were learning PJK with this male teacher. Going good, you know. We were talking about sexual harassment and how to take care of yourself, your body right. He was making a couple of jokes, but it seemed normal at first. But slowly the jokes were getting weirder and more lucha. And then we were talking about how there's a lot of laws protecting minors from sexual abuse or sexual harassment. And then he said, guess what? Kung nanti korang nak rogol, janganlah rogol yang bawah 18, korang rogol yang atas 18.
Which was, if you wanted to rape someone, rape over 18 and not under 18. And also, boys don't report when they get raped because they feel good from it.
What is so special about Ain? I grew up in Malaysia. I had my teenage years there. And we are always silent. In Malaysia, teenagers don't do activism. We don't do that. So when I come here and I see that all of you, the youngsters, being activists at such young age, it's for me, it's new. It's something that you don't see every time.
I'm Mikhail Medley, the youth support manager for the Music Works. We're a state-of-the-art creative space for young people, and we work with young people from challenging circumstances to transform their lives through music. And it's amazing to work with organisations like this and have this event going on today. And I'm hoping that we'll do much, much more of these types of events in the future.
Outside